This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewald, Senior Fellow for the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mara Donnelly. Mara, welcome.
Hello, Charlie.
Why, let's talk about today. Let's talk about an issue that Henry George talked about quite a few years ago. Henry George once said that people that believe that tigers live and eat on oranges are the same that will tell you that there is no coercion when unionization is being discussed.
Oh.
That he's saying that essentially the essence of power, the power of unions, is coercion. And we have, I think, one of the best persons in Pennsylvania to talk about this issue, and that is Dave Taylor, who is the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Dave, welcome back to the set.
Thanks very much for having me. Great to be with
Dave.
you.
A set, by the way, that your organization had a lot to do with, and we want to thank you.
Well, we're very glad to upscale every time that we can.
Well, it's we really are very grateful for everything that you've done to help the program for the last 10 years. So, this whole notion about union coercion, we've always known that unions from time to time, particularly blue-collar unions, can use heavy-handed tactics. What a lot of people are surprised to find is that there is a portion of Pennsylvania law which protects some of these tactics. Could you talk about that for a minute?
Yes, and certainly, freedom of association is one of our core rights as American citizens to join or not join any organization as we see fit. So it's not anti-union to say that that the law should apply equally to everyone, employers, employees, union members, all of us. That's what the law is for. And people, I think, will be shocked to learn that, in fact, there's a special carve-out in Pennsylvania law that correctly, Pennsylvania law says that it is illegal to stalk people, to harass them, to make deadly threats against them. I think those are things that we can all agree to, that those things should be illegal. Those things should be illegal, and they are, except if you are a party to a labor dispute. If you are a party to a labor dispute, you can stalk, you can harass, you can make deadly threats against people, and that those things are not, in fact, criminal, and you cannot be prosecuted for them. So, again, we are concerned about the culture of violence and intimidation that this special carve-out in the law allows, and that there's a bill by Representative Ron Miller from York County, House Bill 1154, that would eliminate this carve-out and have Pennsylvania law apply equally to everyone with no special exceptions. And that we've been pleased that the House Judiciary Committee held a hearing, has approved the bill, and that we're looking forward to further action on that legislation in the State House.
Well, Dave, I can hear our viewers saying, well, what's the big deal? I mean, so it's in the law. That doesn't necessarily mean that anybody needs to be protected from it.
Well, there are reasons why those things, harassing, stalking, and making deadly threats, specifically in the law, it's threatening use of a weapon of mass destruction. So, I mean, you hear that and you think about, Bashir Assad, but actually what we mean here is poison or fire or explosives. So, whereas it would otherwise be a crime for me to say, I'm going to blow up your car, I'm going to burn down your house, I'm going to poison your dog. If you're a party to a labor dispute, those things are not illegal.
Are they happening?
Well, they are, and that was the really eye-opening event at the House Judiciary Committee hearing, where we heard from a series of employers and business representatives who, in the midst of labor disputes, encountered a lot of real ugliness. And the thing also to emphasize here is that the carve-out in the law that allows for the stalking and the harassment and the threats leads to escalation. That, yes, it is still illegal to do those things that are threatened, but by permitting the threat, you establish an environment where it becomes that much easier to lead to the next step. But no, there were several really horrifying examples that were presented at the hearing.
Was there an example? Was the example of what happened in Philadelphia with the Quakers construction brought up? Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I don't think most people outside of the Philadelphia area have heard of this.
Yeah, I testified alongside my friend Rob Reeves, who is the head of the E.A. Reeves Incorporated Construction Company, which is founded by his grandfather, and that E.A. Reeves does a lot of work for museums, for academic institutions, and for houses of worship, and that E.A. Reeves had been chosen by the Society of Friends, the Quakers, to build what was the first new Quaker meeting house in Philadelphia in 80 years. And it was last December, in fact, 5 days before Christmas, that the Quaker meeting house in Philadelphia was subject to arson, that construction equipment was firebombed, and that an acetylene torch was expertly used to cut the steel support beams that had been placed in the foundation concrete at the house of worship. Now, that was on a overnight between, I think, a Thursday and a Friday, 5 days before Christmas. At the start of that week, on that Monday, the business representative from the Iron Workers Union was on site uninvited for the last time. There had been multiple visits, and upon his departure, being turned away because he had said, you guys shouldn't be only using non-union labor, you guys should hire some of my people. And when he was rebuffed, he departed saying, well, I got to do what I got to do. And then, again, 4 days later, that the place is torched and $500,000 worth of damage is inflicted upon this holy site. It's unspeakable.
It's the stuff that movies are made of.
And yet it sounds like something from the mob wars of Prohibition long ago and far away.
Wow.
No, it happened right here in Pennsylvania within the last 12 months.
Well, I have to ask you, this has really become a big issue. I'm not sure that a lot of people are aware of it, but it is coming to light now. It would seem to me that the unions, common sense perspective, would be saying, we don't need this. We don't need this kind of protection. Why aren't they in the forefront of fighting or changing this law?
Well, it's a very good question because at the hearing that Frank Snyder, who's the AFL-CIO Secretary-Treasurer, he testified, and at that hearing that he said, as to the examples that had been put forward in the first person at that hearing on that day, that organized labor does not condone the methods described.
Well, that's wonderful.
But in the same breath, he argued against eliminating the carve-out. And it's very interesting because his argument is that the carve-out in the law is actually for the employer side, and then he himself went on to recount, terrible incidents of harassment and intimidation, and his hotel room got tossed and things like that. The argument he can't even be called an argument. It makes no sense. Because, again, as representatives of the employer community, we are saying that the carve-out should be eliminated. The law should apply to everyone.
Right.
And certainly, if there are things that employers are doing that would otherwise be crimes, that's not acceptable, and those things should be made illegal as well. So the AFL-CIO position, to the extent that it was explained, makes no sense at all. They're in favor of continuing the carve-out.
What are they afraid of?
I guess people making free choices.
What was the disposition of the case in Philadelphia, Dave? Were charges ever brought against
the Philadelphia police investigated. The case was opened. As far as I know, it's still opened. I mean, the Philadelphia Police Department said that this clearly was union-related, and that this arson was an act of sabotage.
But it was considered to be protected behavior because of
that
provision of the law?
And again, the arson is still a crime, but the ironworker union business manager coming and visiting the site and saying it would be most unfortunate if something was to happen to you.
Threats.
That's not illegal. That's not illegal, but it should be. Mm-hmm. If somebody says you should be careful starting your car in the morning, that should be illegal regardless of the circumstances. And again, that this culture of violence and intimidation, the change must begin by changing the law, eliminating the double standard and making it clear that this is not acceptable in any context.
What is the status of the legislation at this time?
Well, we were very pleased to see it advance through the House Judiciary Committee, and we expect further action on the House floor. And again, we're continuing to work with all of our allies, and there's no reason why this shouldn't proceed through the state Senate and get to the governor's desk.
Are there other measures that the PMA is considering or looking at this point in terms of union violence?
Well, I mean, one of the other things that really does need to be changed is under current law, if in a labor dispute situation, if a party requires a court injunction to say, and what I mean, from the employer side, if you see that the striking union is allowed to peacefully picket and demonstrate, they are not allowed to prevent entrance or exit from the place of business. They're not allowed to prevent supply trucks from loading and unloading. And if those things happen, that a workplace is being blockaded, that the employer can take it to the courts and get a court order saying that the strikers need to comply with the law. Unfortunately for the employer, if at that point the union still doesn't voluntarily comply, the employer has to go to the sheriff's office and hire sheriff's deputies to enforce the court order. So you have additional costs that are being placed on the innocent party, and that Representative Steve Bloom has legislation that would say basically, you broke it, you bought it. That if you are a party to a labor dispute, whether you're the employer or the union, and that you do something that requires a court order, an injunction to be issued, then whichever party is at fault is the one that has to pay the cost of enforcing the order. I mean, it's basic
It's
justice.
a no-brainer.
It ought to be. It ought to be. And we're continuing to work with our allies on that, and that, again, is a piece of legislation that deserves to advance.
It is a little crazy to. I think it's a little crazy to be talking about these issues. You would think that in this this day and age we would be beyond this with the unions.
Well, and again, if the unions can can show value to their members, that it's
in whatever means possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's the difference between voluntary and involuntary unionism. I regret that anymore. It seems like organized labor has lost that sense of guild, like the skilled trade, to say, use us, choose us, because while we may be a higher price, we are a better value. That so much that quality just seems to be gone. And
yeah.
And we need to return to that, because again, organized labor has an important role to play in in imparting those skills for the trades that we need for for a 21st century workforce.
Well, and representing their members in a legal manner.
Yes,
yeah,
that would
absolutely.
That would be nice.
Just to wrap us up, do you know what year that legislation was originally adopted, Dave?
Oh, the carve out for
yes.
for the threats and the stalking and the harassment.
What does that date back to?
It goes back to the 1930s. I mean, back to the era where organized labor in Pennsylvania was at its apex. And that's why these kinds of unfair advantages got written into the law.
Because I imagine there were many public policy makers and many legislators on the Hill that weren't even aware that that carve-out existed.
No, and this has been part of our effort, just explaining the status of the law and then convincing people that we're not pulling their leg. We're not. This is it's shocking, it's outrageous, and it should be unacceptable to all of us.
Well, Dave, we want to thank you very much for your visit today. We look forward to your return soon, and we wish you, as the holiday season approaches, we wish you and your family the happiest of
Much
holidays
to be thankful
as well.
for. Thank you.
We'll be back with the second segment of Behind the Headlines right after this.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The Council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions that make the Commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States. And by Penn Waste, your best local choice for your waste removal and recycling needs.
Penn Waste is proud to be a locally owned business. Since the company's founding in 2000, it has employed many of its neighbors as members of a dedicated team of professionals. Penn Waste is proud of its many contributions to the people of its service area through support of numerous community organizations such as Christmas Addicts and the Junior League of York. One more way they improve the quality of life where they live and work.
Hi, welcome back to the second segment of Behind the Headlines. And on this segment, we are happy to have with us the chairman of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, Mr. Ed Arnold. Ed, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Charlie. Good to see you.
Why, Ed, I don't even know where to start. There's so much that's in the news and so much on which you've had experience with over the years as one of the Commonwealth's leading businessmen, one of the nation's leading businessmen, and as someone who's highly knowledgeable about the state and national economy. And, of course, as a businessman, a former owner of New Penn Trucking and Arnold Trucking, you had to deal with healthcare costs for your employees all the time, I imagine. And now, of course, we find that industries across the country are faced with the reality of the Affordable Care Act, or what some people call Obamacare. We've seemed to have had a few glitches as this has been rolled out. What would you say how would you say the introduction of Obamacare has gone, Ed?
First of all, you are grossly under-exaggerating. This has been, I don't think there is any precedence in industry or in the country, any country, where a rollout has been worse. Mm-hmm. I mean, overall, when we did Medicare, Medicaid, the drug programs, basically, I'm sure there were some complaints, but it was minor. This is a disaster. First of all, it's so giantly encompassing. I mean, it's typical of our government. Government's like an iceberg. We only see 10% of the problems. The other 90% are always hidden from view. In this case, the problems have actually popped out. We're seeing the whole iceberg. It is so bad that even the news cannot cover it up, and our president has not actually apologized to the American people for his incompetence, but he has somewhat admitted that, yes, there is a problem, as you have said.
He came out in the Rose Garden and admitted
Yes.
that there were some problems with the implementation.
What I'd say is we cannot really go into detail and talk about it because it is hard to get clear, straight information. What we do know, though, is about this plan is it is an extremely badly designed. It discriminates, number one, against marriage, massive discrimination, because if you're single, you get subsidies at a way higher level than if you're married. I won't go into the details, but we're talking about thousands of dollars. It's saying don't get married or get divorced. It'll be far more economically practical.
So this is another program. This is very similar to some of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs in the 1960s that penalized married couples and rewarded single people. So it's the same.
That's correct, except this is almost on steroids. Everything about this program is badly on steroids. The other thing, they keep saying there's more choices. That is not true. This is a very comprehensive required plan. You must have maternity leave. You must have health care. You must have pre-existing conditions. You must have drug coverage. So all these things you must have. It makes for a wonderful insurance package, but it's a very expensive one. And if you don't want them, you must. This is why so many employers are saying they're going to drop their plans. A lot of insurance companies are dropping their plans because they don't comply with all this comprehensiveness. And the costs are going to be astronomical. And the cost shifting is going to be astronomical. From the healthy people who take care of themselves, the younger, from the sick, and the people who don't take care of themselves. This is definitely clear. This plan is going to be very expensive. And what we don't really know is we keep talking about, well, the subsidies will make it less costly. The government pays the subsidies. We're saying this is a neutral cost, but it is not. This is going to cost hundreds of billions of dollars in a government that already is massively in debt. that because there's no way we can have all these subsidies and not have a greater cost. Again, there's no visibility, so we cannot be sure what exactly we're going to.
What we've heard, and this almost changes every day, Ed, but what we've heard at the beginning here of the implementation of the Affordable Care Act is that the average premium for the average male in America will increase 99%. The average health insurance premium for the average woman in the United States will increase by 66%. And there are many, many Americans that are expecting to have health care that is affordable, and this doesn't sound affordable.
No, I don't believe it is affordable at all. I think it is going to be it is opening the door. We are going to destroy our present system, and we're going to beg for socialized medicine.
Of course, this is 1/5 of the nation's economy. This is
correct.
approximately
it is
20%.
Presently 18% on its way to being some, which we'll get into a little bit later, on the how we're going to, the world only equals 100. And we keep saying this piece is going to take more of the pie, medical, is going to take more of the pie, then somebody else has got to get less of the pie. Because the pie is only going to be 100 pieces. That's all you can get.
Now, the Republicans, the Republican caucus in the U.S. House of Representatives in Washington has been concerned about this and has been concerned about the implementation and the cost of the Affordable Care Act. And, of course, we saw recently the so-called national government shutdown over a disagreement on this plan and how it should be implemented. Obviously, the Republicans didn't get what they wanted at this point. What should they have done? What should they do in the future?
Well, first of all, I think they should have communicated a lot better.
Okay.
And obviously, they mixed the problem of our budget, which is a very critical item in its own right, with Obamacare, the medical problem. And really what they should have done when they realized they could not, you should never go into a battle when you don't know how it's going to end. And obviously this could not. This is almost like an Iraq for the Republican Party. So overall, that they basically should have addressed the budget, which is critical. We have a major problem, which I would like to get into here, and just where is America going? And this is what they should have addressed, in that, yes, we've got to address our budget, and Obamacare is a disaster. We warned you, America, we'll put you on notice, but we can't do anything about it.
What it seems, Ed, though, and we've both grown up in an era when there may have been disagreements between legislative leaders or between the chief executive, the president, and the legislature, the Congress, but that they could always talk, that Tip O'Neill would sit down with Ronald Reagan, that Richard Nixon would sit down with Hubert Humphrey, that it seems that even though our past leaders had differences, that they could look for common ground and they could try to shape some compromises. It seems that are we losing this in Washington?
Well, I would like to quickly just show you where we're going. And again, I keep saying the pie only has 100 pieces. Right now, according to different groups, and I took 3 areas, 2005, 2012.
The pie being the federal budget.
The federal budget, 13, and then going out a little bit in the future, 21, 22. And part of this is from, first of all, the transparency in our government and our budget. Our budget is never audited. It's never really found out what does it really cost.
Well, and of course, we remind our viewers that we haven't had a national budget through the whole Obama administration.
That's correct.
For 4 years, we have funded the federal government on continuing resolutions.
And that's what basically the Republicans are trying to address this, because they see what's happening. According to groups, we're going to go from today around 6% of our national budget is interest. It's going to go up to 15%. This seems to be agreed.
In what year, Ed?
This is 21-22. That Medicare, Medicaid is going to go from we're right now in the low 40s to the high 40s. Well, you can say, well, where is this money going to come from? Well, according to, again, making 100, and things must equal 100, we're going to drastically reduce discretionary spending from presently in the area of 15, 16 down to 12 to 10. That's impossible. We're not going to cut all the government departments down by that amount. That we've got defense, we're saying, which is right now around 19% of our budget, is going to come down to 13, 14. these don't make sense but again, if you're going to increase medical drastically, which we are, if you're going to increase the interest, those two things are absolutely positively mandated. Well, then you must shrink everything else.
And discretionary funding would be essentially the operations of the government. All the rest of the budget would be then entitlements.
Well, the thing is, your entitlements, because you're mandatory, they even want to shrink the mandatory entitlements, which we know Obama wants to add a lot more to our mandatory requirements. And one of the things that is very funny, the way our government does our budget, is that Veterans Affairs is part of the mandatory. It's not part of the defense budget. The other thing also I noticed in my research was that our defense budget shows 2/3 is involved with current operations, 1/3 is past obligations. So we're talking about the retired people and all their medical and all this and all that. Well, that again isn't going to shrink. So when we talk about shrinking the defense budget, the actual current would shrink to unbelievably small numbers, which we've never been, except probably between World War I and World War II, when we really shrank the military drastically.
And we already have a Navy that's the smallest it's been since 1914.
Yeah, so overall, again, if you're going to increase medical, you're going to increase interest. This is what the Republicans are saying. We've got to start to get our budget under control. They haven't communicated, or the news, again, our news media will not pick up anything that is critical of Obama. This is a very serious problem. But so, unfortunately, what we have to do, and it's really ugly, is we've got to address the future is going in the wrong direction. We are going back at a drastic pace. And so therefore it is critical that we get our medical under control, but we also get our spending under control, because we cannot continue to manipulate interest rates to keep them at a ridiculously low level. We are totally irresponsible today. We have taken our debt from, it used to be so much 30 years, so much 10 years, so much this. It's almost all short term. 60-70% of our debt is now matures in 2 years. That is totally irresponsible, but it's cheaper that way. Temporarily.
Okay. Well, we want to thank you for your insights into all these subjects. I have a feeling that these subjects need to be talked about again, and it will be continuing topics of conversation here on the show and with you and other guests. So we're looking for you to come back again soon, and we'll be back again next week with a new edition of Behind the Headlines. We'll see you then.